What's up guys, Zedd here, bringing you another Soul Calibur 6 video. Today's video is going to be the updated tier list. The last time I did the tier list was a fair bit ago, and unfortunately, as soon as I did that video, quite literally 2 days later, there was a patch, and it actually changed some of the characters. One in particular was Mitsurugi, and then I'm pretty sure that was the same patch that lowered Setsuka's damage. So, with that said, there are some changes, and then my opinion has changed as well. It's just the natural flow of the game. So, here's my updated tier list. Because it's been a little while, I am going to go through each character and talk about sort of their strengths and weaknesses and my thoughts on them. Some characters will take longer than others, and some won't. These videos tend to be very long, and I always do them while I'm streaming. So, yeah, there might be some chat interaction. I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can. It's not scripted, as you guys know. By now, I don't write down any of my content. I just do it all off the cuff because that's how we roll, and we're about that life. So, without further ado, let's get started. Just to explain the tiers really quick, the tier disparity in Soul Calibur is so minimal compared to some other games, and pardon me, this is a good thing. So what I mean by that is the difference between S and B is quite minimal in the grand scheme of things, but we're being very critical. And so for the critics out there who are like, but Zedd, Soul Calibur is so balanced, you don't need a tier list. You're right. You don't have to make a tier list for this game, and you'd be fine. You could win a tournament with almost any character except for one, but we'll get there. So yeah, just keep that in mind, that the tiers are my opinion, my experience, and hopefully I can try to justify that to you guys. And so let's just get straight on into it. So first up, we're going to have in the top of the S tier, we're going to have Amy. So Amy, she's kind of been here for me for a long time. The reason why she's up here is she just, as soon as she gets the red roses online, which she needs 4 of to do, she essentially has every tool you need to really have a full-on plausible game plan. And that's really frustrating because a character like Amy, she's very safe, good pokes, very strong in terms of damage. And her neutral's pretty good. She has a tech crouching horizontal mid, safe launchers, good pokes, I-10 vertical. She just has a lot of stuff. And when she's in Red Roses, she just gets enhancements on top of that already well-rounded kit. Therefore, she becomes sort of an all-arounder, but who's good at everything, which is very difficult to deal with in general. Now, she doesn't have the perfect matchup chart, of course. Nobody in Calibur does, but the point is, just generally speaking, she is such a powerful character with very little weakness. A lot of players are picking her up now, or have, I should say, picked her up because of her potency, and she frankly just outclasses a lot of other characters. Yeah, so she's a fantastic character. You can't go wrong with Amy. Her biggest shortcomings, frankly, are, her range kind of, but she has decent approach. Plus the fact that if you happen to not get roses, 4 roses, then yeah, you don't have a fantastic character, and so Roseless Amy is kind of more like A tier, higher end of the A tier. And I should have mentioned that the tier list is ordered. My apologies. But since getting the roses is very easy, and some combos even give you 2 roses, she is very capable of getting those roses, and so is easily in S tier for me. Sorry on the mistake. So previously in the tier list, I had Zasalamel right beside Amy, but my opinion on the character has since shifted. So I'm not going to have anyone else in the S tier, actually. It's just going to be Miss Amy on her own. So first up here in the A+ tier, we have Zaz. Zaz is a great character. He does 2 things better than any other character, and that is he just controls the horizontal plane and in general controls your movement better than any other character. Alongside that, he has the best reverse ring out game in the game, and by best I mean the amount of ways that he can do it. I'm fairly certain, without double checking, he has 8 different ways to reverse ring you out in his entire kit, which is a lot. And 2 of them are from throws, so you can do a forward throw or a back throw, and you're gonna get rung out either way. In general, his damage is a little low without curses, which of course is his unique mechanic. And recent changes have made it so that his critical edge isn't so powerful and potent anymore. If you have no curses on you, it does not auto GI highs, which is a pretty big deal. With that said too, he has had some changes that have helped him. One of them in particular is his 4A plus B, which is a move you previously never would have seen since its change. He essentially spins the scythe many times. It does so much guard damage, and on hit it gives a free 6k curse. For I'm pretty sure it's 54 damage, 52 or 54 damage. It's a lot for a move that's safe and does 11. I think it's 11% guard damage. I could be wrong on that as well, but pretty confident in that. So really good move. Yeah, he controls a lot of space. Yes, he pulls you in, but he's not S tier as I thought. So I recently spent a lot of time playing Zas just to sort of, well, looking for a secondary, but also to try to get a better understanding of the character. And I've somewhat figured out why a lot of Zasalamel players play him the way they do, and why in my opinion, the best ones don't play him the way that most of them do. Needless to say, his frame data doesn't really allow him to just keep constantly taking his turn. So that was something that I, as a player, was over-respecting, if I'm going to be honest. And I think I see a lot of players make the same mistakes I did. I just started basically challenging more and forcing him to use his GI and reversal edge. And you'll see a lot more success just in general. But he does still control the space. He does still reverse ring out better than basically any character in the game for the most part. So he's still a great character. He might not be at the top of A+, so he might rearrange it later, but I am dropping him from S. He is not without his flaws. You know, his lows aren't that good without curses, and with curse it's just 1 BP, which is super punishable, launch punishable if you have a while rising launcher or a full crouch launcher. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Zaz. Good character, really annoying to fight for sure, but definitely manageable. Not what he once was. So next up here, we're going to have Mr. Raphael. So Raph nothing's changed really for Raph for a while. He's just a great character in general. He has a little bit of an execution barrier. Okay. For caliber standards, he has an execution barrier. He takes a lot of effort to play optimally. His punishment game is absolutely insane, very powerful. His lethal hits are very strong, and his pressure can be quite suffocating if you don't know how to deal with his stances. What holds him back just enough, I say hold him back, what keeps Raph in check is his lack of, I guess, ability to control your step. He does have horizontals, and they are usable for sure, but they're not, like, the risk reward ratio just isn't there. Raph's not going to get anything for them, and so you don't really have anything to fear when you're defending against them. Therefore, step ducking or stepping in general against Raph is a really good strategy, which will force the Raph to sort of slow it down, play a more whiff punishing or punishing defensive game plan. That would be my suggestion. But great character, very good damage, a great soul charge. Whiff punishment is great. He has an I-10 vertical. Longest reaching I-10 in the game behind Amy. And overall just really potent character who you do have to respect. For sure. Very few Raph players, but it's not because he's bad. I'll tell you that much. It's because he's hard to play and takes a lot of effort to really optimize. So, not as much to say about Raph as the other two. He's been the same for a long time. Great character. You can't really go wrong with Raphael. So next up in the A+, we're going to have... Where are we? I'm sorry, where is he? Here we are, Yosh1. So, Yosh1 is kind of the meme. As in Yoshimitsu #1. This character is really good. Much like Amy, he sort of is an all-arounder. He has tools for basically every job now. In Season 2, they gave him a few things he was missing. His reverse ring out game is great, and so you could argue that his is better than Zas, and by better, I mean the range on his reverse ring out is insane, but his reverse ring out does take meter, so, a trade-off there in that respect. But, so he has a reverse ring out game, fantastic mix-ups, fantastic lows, great pokes, an I-10. His soul charge is great. His CE, while a little niche, is powerful in its niche application, that being a whiff punishment or a heavy read on a GI or RE. Yeah, he frankly just has every kind of tool you'd possibly need out of a character. With that said, he's very complex. There's a lot to this character. It's going to take you a long time to really optimize your time on Yoshimitsu, or your not your time, sorry, to optimize your game plan as Yoshimitsu. And so playing Yoshi is a bit of a commitment. He's not much of a side character. I don't know why you'd want to have side character Yoshi, but yeah, so really strong character, has pretty much all the tools you could ask for. The only thing, and his movement's great too. The only thing you can kind of be lacking and feel like you're missing as Yoshi is maybe range. He lacks a little bit in that department, at least in the horizontal range. His linear range is solid, but his horizontal range, yeah, not really there. But yeah, no, great character, great setups. If you want a character with really setup based and like mind game offense and Oki, Yoshi's a fantastic pick. He's not a straightforward character at all, and so that in itself plays to his strengths. Very unorthodox, and can be piloted by or in so many different ways. And so many of the best players actually play Yoshi, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So Yoshi, fantastic character. All right, so next up, in the A+, we're going to put in, where are we at here? We're going to put in Xianghua. So Xianghua is a character who she has this weird thing where the people who play Xianghua are on two fields of view. Either they think that she's not good and needs buffs, or they think that she's fantastic and hasn't needed changes since forever. Other characters have that too, but with Xianghua it seems to be somewhat noticeable compared to the others, which I find a little silly because she's such a strong character and she actually has almost every tool you could ask for. So Xianghua, if you know anything about Xianghua, she's been around since the beginning of Calibur, and she's been the same since, basically. Fantastic frame data, I-10, safe on basically every move you'd want to use that isn't a low, I-12 critical edge, decent soul attack with a little bit of experimentation. Her soul charge has seen a bunch of buffs, so now it's actually usable, whereas previously it was like, why would I ever bother with this button? But now it's pretty good. Her whiff punishment, if you're quick, is great. Her punishment game's a little lacking in terms of damage. That's a key distinction. But I don't see that as a weakness because she has the I-12 critical edge. I don't think she needs more damage on her punishment game, right? So it's a bit of a trade-off. The only things that Xianghua is lacking, the only two things that would really help her game plan, is her fastest horizontal mid, if I'm remembering off the top of my head, is I-24, which is very slow. That's at 22 or 24. And that is 4-4-A and A-slide K, they're the same frame. And so a faster hori mid would complete the kit, but I also think it would break the character. And she also does lack a little bit of damage outside of meter. So, like, her lethal hit game is kind of what I mean. So as a segue on that point, her lethal hits require either string-based characters. By that I mean you can auto-GI their strings. And that, of course, is how you're going to net a lot of damage. Or you use those auto-GIs in setup situations as a hard read. The problem with this is they're, of course, all punishable. So in order for Xianghua to generate any amount of damage, she has to be making some sort of a defensive or offensive read to land her lethal hit damage. Without the lethal hits, she has, or without the lethal hits and without the meter, her damage is rather pitiful for the most part. With that said, though, she has a lot of means to deal damage, right? So very great pokes, very mosquito-based offense, like touch and go, touch and go. Safe launchers, of course, are a fantastic way to fish for this damage. And you can't really go wrong by playing Xianghua, but do know that she is a bit of an investment. She's not a great side character unless you are specifically choosing her for a good matchup. The reason I say this is it does require a lot of matchup or character knowledge to take full advantage of her very counter-based kit, if that makes sense. So, great character. My main, clearly, but I think she's very strong. Very confident that she's in the top 5 right now. So, that's my thoughts on Xianghua, and we'll move on from there. So I might end up putting characters in different tiers, but for now, I'm going to put Setsuka as well in A+ tier. Setsuka is our newest addition to the roster. Another great character. She's always been top tier in any of the Caliber games that she's been in, or in the case of Soul Calibur 5, you of course have Alpha Patroclus. The reason why this is a good character is just the style's design. So it's a very safe character, even though she has some punishingly, like severely punishing moves. You don't have to use them. Her game plan is very counter hit based, with punishment and counter hit based. These counter hits, while she has many options, are either entirely safe or very safe, and they lead to crazy good damage and pretty good Oki. She's also very fast for a character who tends to rely on this more counter hit style. Her damage, while it was hit, is still very good. Her meter gain is a little low, but that's because her soul charge gives her access to like ludicrous damage. And she even gets, I think it's 52 damage off of her 1A low, where she goes 1, 2, 3, and then soul charge she goes 4, 5. So we know Setsuka can count to 5. That's great, and it leads to a decent Oki situation. So she does hit like a truck. Very good counter hits. Really tricky execution. Her and Raphael have very unique inputs in this game. If you want to be optimal with them, so she will require somewhat of an investment to get good at these inputs. But if you can get Setsuka down, she is an incredibly competitive character by design. Very slow. She wants to just slow the game down. She has command throws in both directions. What that means is, if you break either direction against Setsuka, she's +8, which therefore enforces her counter hit game plan, right? So you try to swing into her +8, which you shouldn't do. Oh, now I got counter hit, and now I'm eating my entire life bar. So great character, great kit. The only real thing she's lacking is somewhat of a quick Hori mid, but even then, I don't think Setsuka mains are trying for one. It's just sort of something she lacks. She also doesn't have great lows, but they're serviceable. They're definitely serviceable, but they're nothing special. They're not bad though. They're not Taki levels of low, but we'll get to Taki. So that's my thoughts on Setsuka. Great character, great kit, counter hit based, can't go wrong in a competitive environment. All right, next up in A+, we have Mi-na. Seong Mi-na. This character is just, I'm so over this character. She's so irritating. She's very potent, very basic, but a great character. Nobody plays her though, and I think that's more of out of disdain for the character than anything else. Pardon me. Clearly, I'm tired. She hits like a truck. Her Oki, in my opinion, her Oki is by far the best in the game, because of how it works. So while a character like Xianghua or Yoshimitsu's Oki is good because they have a lot of options or things that they can do and set up, a character like Seong Mi-na is so strong because she might only have just off the top of my head, 3 or 4 options. You know what they all are. But the problem is, there's not just a clear counterplay option to them. And in one case, you're just taking like insane amounts of guard damage, or you're taking insane amounts of damage into a potential relaunch or lethal hit, or you're simply getting hit because you're not blocking low, or you stay on the ground. Like, in general, her Oki, while it's so simple, it is just so damn effective. And that's why it's so good. Like I already said, she hits like a truck, very potent. Her keep out game is very good. That's her whole thing. There have been nerfs to her to very impactful lows, that being full crouch 1kk, which is the Hell Sweep, and the speed of the 4-4A move was also slowed down. So in an offline environment, Mi-na did take some hits for sure, because the 4-4A lethal hit used to be an absolutely amazing Oki option that she now doesn't really get to go for. With that said, though, the full crouch 1kk is still a great low. It's just you have to actually finish it in order to get the knockdown effect, which I'm pretty sure is 34 damage off the top of my head. So it's still a great low, still knocks down. It just doesn't lead into a full combo or a tech trap situation off of just the full crouch 1k. So those 2 nerfs to her lows kind of tighten her up a bit, whereas previously she was just insane. Just had kind of tools for everything, but now they kind of they dialed her in. They made her a bit more, not unique, but they made her game plan a bit more clear, and I think that's a very healthy state for a character. She has a lot of really good tools. The only thing, not the only thing, the biggest part of her kit is that when you get in her face, she does struggle a fair bit to deal with you if you have really good frame data. So just for example, characters like Yoshimitsu or Cassandra or Xianghua, Amy, those characters in Mi-na's face are really tricky for her to get off. She does have the tools to get you off. The problem is she has to take a risk to do them or hope that she lands the counter hit. So that is where she struggles, but like not that many characters play up in their face. Like if you look at the roster, most characters are kind of that mid-range range, and that's kind of where Seong Mi-na wants to be. So when you're playing against Mi-na in Mi-na's range, it's probably a losing fight. If you can get within that range, it's in your favor. If you're outside of that range, it's still Mi-na's favor. So take that for what you will. I think she's a really good character, even though she's a bit basic and one-dimensional now. I think it's such an effective game plan that you cannot discount a Mi-na ever. You cannot discount a Mi-na. She's going to beat your ass if you make one mistake. And that's the whole thing. It's kind of like Astaroth. Every mistake is like a third of your life. So, Mi-na's a good character, very basic, great, easy to pick up, and good fun to play if you just love beating on people. So, that's my thoughts on Mi-na. Alright. Now, I think we're coming on to the tail end of A+ here. Yes, we are. So, next up, we would have Hilde. Hilde is a great character. Very all-around, very solid. She controls the neutral game very well. Her damage is incredibly high with the Regalia arts and her charge attacks. But overall, she's very hard to punish and just in general control. Like if you're a very slow player or defensive, or rather footsie neutral based, Hilde is an amazing character for you to play. She's very hard to break down, very effective kit, kind of has every tool for the job, literally. And I think that's what makes her so good. And the just sheer amount of horizontal mids that she has is so good, and they're all safe. And the reason why I mention that is, even though you could argue, well, Zedd, every character can just do a move into 2A. Yeah, true. The problem with 2A, again, for most of the cast, is either it's really stubby, or it's just a special mid, and so, or special low rather. So theoretically, it could be jumped over. Hilde, this is not the case. Not only are they great moves, but some of them counter hit into combo or extensions, and her Oki game is incredibly powerful too. But they're safe for her mids, and she can also just let her rip after any kind of moves just by releasing A. And so she doesn't really need to 2A. Her 2A is still fine, but the sheer existence of those horizontal mids makes her controlling the up close space very good. And then when you're like, okay, I'm not going to play in Hilde's face, let's back it up a bit. She has incredibly good just verticals that are super powerful, very linear, granted, but they're powerful, so you cannot get hit by those. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad time. I think Hilde is a great character. I think that she's not underrepresented, actually, to my surprise. But I do think that people undervalue her. I think she's better than people think she is, for different reasons. Because frankly, I just don't think Hilde has a weakness, and that's what I think makes her so strong. Not a clear weakness, anyway. So, in that sense, I think Hilde is really good. Maybe that's a small hot take. I don't know, but I think she's really good. And you just can't go wrong with this character if you can get past the charge mechanic. That's of course what holds her back a little bit, but if you can get over that hump, I think you're good to go. And she's a good character. So yeah, I think that we've only got about one left. Yeah, one left. Yep, one A+ character left, and that is Ivy. So Ivy, really good character, has been for a long time now. A bit of an execution barrier with her command throws. She does have some holes for sure, and some recent changes. For example, her Christmas tree being consistently punishable now. That's a really big deal. But in general, she just has a really effective kit, and she can just loop you over and over and over on Oki if you're wrong. And she just hits so hard. Her matchup chart has gotten a bit better over time. By better, I mean she actually has more losing matchups, whereas in the past she was pretty dominant. But overall, still a great character. She controls space very, very well. Kind of like Mi-na, when you get in her face, she can struggle a little bit. But unlike Mi-na, she doesn't just rely on the mid-range. She does have a full, complete kit. And a very good CE. It is a GI, much akin to Zasalamel. So in that sense, it's very hard to pressure an Ivy when she has meter. And speaking of, her soul charge options are also very good. So Ivy doesn't really complain by using soul charge, because she not only does she get good moves, but she also splats you away into her comfort range, which is of course the mid range. So yeah, Ivy's a great character. You know, a lot of Ivies are tend to be really good players, and yeah, she's a great character. All right. So moving on to, let's move on to A tier. So let's see. First up, first up in the A tier, we're gonna have Mitsurugi. I might rearrange this spot, but so Mitsurugi, Mitsurugi is a really solid character in general, and the changes he received kind of brought him back a little bit. He what he was missing before was, like, his damage was hit a little too hard. The risk reward was not in his favor, and they took away some of the speed of his tools in general, but they brought a little bit of that back. They gave him another means of accessing Shura Blade, which is his unique install. So in general, I think a really solid character. I still think he's outclassed though, but you cannot be sleeping on Mitsurugi anymore. Like, if you were before, you can't now. Really solid character. A little more focused around his stance game than I think maybe Mitsurugi veterans would like. Because if you try to play Rugi without his stances, it's kind of, he's a very ho-hum character, probably A- tier, but they really dialed in a little bit on his stances. And so, much more well-rounded kit, but a little more stance focused than he used to be. But I think just a solid character. And yeah, really middle of the pack. Um, yeah. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Mitsu. Moving on to Cervantes, kind of the same thing. Cervantes, really solid character, very good at neutral, controls a lot of space in the horizontal plane. His 3B plus K in particular is a fantastic button. It is a safe vertical thrusting attack that is generally used as a whiff punish, but you can even just fish with it because it does so much bloody damage, and it resets the situation in Cervantes' favor. That's a new button that he got in Season 2, and he's been better for it ever since. His Soul Charge, again, pretty serviceable. His teleport gimmicks and his Dread Charge are all serviceable, but even if you play Cervantes very gimmicky or not gimmicky at all, I think you can get away with a lot of stuff, and he overall is a good character. The only thing Cervantes arguably lacks is effective lows outside of his K2 poke, and K2 being basically a better version of 2K. But outside of that, really good character, powerful damage. He hits like a truck, and you don't want to ever whiff against him, because against a good one, because Cervantes will just slap you with the Just Frame IGDR, which is 214B, into insane damage and full combo and Doki. So really solid character. I don't think you can go wrong with Cervi. Does a lot of damage for sure. All right, next in the A tier we have where are we? Let's do this first. So Nightmare. So Nightmare is a weird one, right? Nightmare's been considered either broken, like top 5, the worst character in the game. He has been all over the tier list over all the regions, and I don't think anyone can ever agree on this character. He is one of the characters where everyone's just like, they just can't make a decision about this character. But I think that the changes he received to his low throw and his AGA getting buffed to +2 on block are both really big deals, and they kind of hone in the character a bit more. So now he's very burst offense oriented in terms of when he hits you, he hits hard. To hit you though, he does have to take risks, because having no standard I-12 and no standard 2A means that he effectively has no ways of forcing his turn or even taking his turn. So theoretically, he can get a bit smothered. Now, of course, he does have the armor to combat this. The problem with the armor is it does get stuffed out by stronger hitting moves or launchers. I believe the damage number is any move that does over 24 damage, if I'm not mistaken, will break through the armor. So what that means is the other character or the other player can just play around this idea and use a lot of those attacks and kind of break down Nightmare. With that said, though, the AGA buff giving him +2 on block is a big deal. It was part of the reason why a lot of Nightmares used to use a ton of ABA, because it was +2 on block, I believe. And so without having the standard I-12, all of a sudden he gets those 2 extra frames to play with. Therefore, it's kind of sort of his turn sometimes. So there's that. Plus, they dialed in and they fixed a lot of his soul charge options. There's still a few that are either steppable or duckable, but in general, in the past, a lot of his soul charge moves were pretty garbage. But now they're a lot better. Hey Mick, what's up? So in general, I think Nightmare is a solid character now. He still has some, like, his matchup chart I think is by far the most diverse, in that he has some matchups where he just freaking runs the train and there's really pretty much nothing you can do about it. On the flip side, Nightmare has some absolutely dumpster fire matchups that he will never be able to win. I say that, but where he rarely will be able to win, and so that polarizing matchup chart does arguably put him in a lower tier bracket. But I think if we just look at it holistically, I think he's somewhere right in the middle for me now, since his changes. So, oh, and with that low throw being I-12 now, and a bit easier to input, he can now punish some things he never could. Just to take an example that I know of and I can speak of, Xianghua, previously her PXS mix-up was free against Nightmare because he could only punish the BB at -14, and he could only punish it with 5k. and he actually could not punish the PXS AA, but now he can. So in that sense, it helped some of his worst matchups. That's just one example I could think of. But in general, I think he's a really solid character. But I think ex Nightmare mains will still tell you he's dog shit. Current Nightmare mains will tell you he's great. And people who don't play Nightmare think he's probably like right here. So I really think this character is just across the board in terms of tiers. But a really solid character nonetheless. Alright, so next up in this mid tier, we have Jerry. So Jerry, I mean, it's Jerry. Like, nobody plays this character anymore because he's just so boring. But the reality of the matter, or the fact of the matter is, he is very well-rounded. Kind of like Hilde, honestly. They kind of have tools for all the jobs. His 3A, his Hori mid, is arguably the best in the game in terms of a neutral horizontal mid. His is arguably the best in the game. The reason for that is it is safe. It never used to be. So it's safe on block, approaching horizontal mid. Give Nightmare A minus. That's fair. I think you could put Nightmare up or down. Or down, not up. But great horizontal mid. Very good range on all of his buttons. And that's kind of what makes Geralt special, is even something like his 5AA. I'm fairly confident that in terms of an I-12 5AA, it's the farthest reaching one in the game other than Aswell and Sword, but even that's I-10. So I haven't actually looked at it, but I would go out on a whim and say Geralt's 5A is the longest reaching I-12 5A in the game. I might be wrong, but that's really beneficial. Same with his 5BB, great range. He has some kind of decent poke base lows. And yeah, overall just a generic kit. It's very solid kit. Because it's not, or because he is very well rounded, his matchup chart is it's very 5-5. Like Geralt, yeah, he has some bad matchups, but he doesn't really have that many good matchups because so many of his matchups are like 5-5. And I actually consider that a strength because that means he's a very consistent character. And I think consistency is very important when you're talking competitive viability, which is, of course, what this tier list is fundamentally based around, is competitive viability. And consistency, to me, is very important in a character's strength. And with that said, I might end up moving Nightmare down, having just talked myself out of it. The consistency argument. So yeah, I think Geralt's a really consistent character, and so you can't really go wrong with that. And yeah, with that consistency statement, I am going to move Nightmare down, changing our mind on the fly, but I think I'm happy with that. So yeah, Geralt, really well-rounded, can't really go wrong. He has some of the best whiff punishment in the game. He has the ability to reverse ring out. Arguably one of the best auto GIs in the game. Great lethal hits. So Geralt, the one thing Geralt has that no other character has, I think, is he has a lethal hit on a fantastic Hori mid, that being 4A. I'm pretty sure that works against a soul charged opponent, and the 4A is only -12. So the fact you can punish people, and he just does extra damage with the silver sword attacks against soul charged opponents, I think that's a really unique strength because it sort of slows down Soul Calibur. We're kind of in this meta right now where it's like soul charge, soul charge, soul charge. And just like every bar of meter, every freaking character is just soul charge, soul charge, soul charge. So Geralt, in a sense, can kind of dissuade that behavior, and I think that in itself is very good, and therefore he's a pretty solid pocket pick because he's easy to play. 4A as an lethal is -16. I might be thinking of a different move then. But solid to play, easy to play, great matchup chart. 4B, that's the one. Yes, thank you. The sword swipe. Yeah. And so yeah, he dissuades the soul charge, and so that in itself is a strength. So moving on, in A tier, we have trying to think who's left. Yeah, okay. So next up we have the Greeks, and I actually put them side by side, and the reason for that is previously I had Sophitia a bit higher up, but that was until they gave some counterplay to her insanely powerful soul charge, and actually I just want to bump her there. So Sophitia, what makes her so powerful, she's very much a legacy character, and by that I mean by design, she's very fundamental, and she kind of is very reminiscent of old school Soul Calibur. And she is a character in which you can play in a very old school way, whereas a lot of the original cast, you even have to sort of step it up. You have to play them a bit more modern. That's a whole nother video concept on its own, so I won't get into that too much. But very pokey, right? Great neutral. Some of the best neutral buttons in the game, right? 66A, 3A, 66B. As a poke tool, 1K is incredibly powerful because of its frame data, but also the fact that on counter hit, the 1K knocks down, which is a really big deal. Great movement. One of the best I-14 I-14 punishers in the game via stab, because if you get double just frame, it's over 50 damage. I can't remember the number now, but over 50 damage for being minus 14 for no meter, which is crazy. And then her 2-2B, while it is a bit of a risky move, it's a sidestep tech crouch move that does crazy damage into Crazy Oki. So yeah, just in general, a great hit and run style and very fundamental, very neutral. And if you kind of want to see the two different styles of Sophie that I'm talking about, like a more old school style versus a new school style, the best examples for her would be like either Ramon from the East Coast US, the New York area, or either Setsuka, who, and they're exactly that. Like Ramon's a little more old school and neutral focus, whereas Setsuka is very tap and go, heavy on the 1K low, a lot of 2-2B reads, and so you can actually see how this character has stood the test of time in that you can be a veteran and play her in a very old school way, and I think that that's pretty awesome. But a great character. What made her, so previously, I think on my list, I had her somewhere up here. A reason why she was up here was her her soul charge 236A plus B, I think is the input. Her Haya that she could spam over and over and over had no counterplay, realistically. Like it was a vertical horizontal, so even if you step the first, it was really difficult to GI or auto GI the follow up consistently. And if the Sophie was smart, she wouldn't do it at a range where just the vert would whiff anyway. And it was +2 on block. And it left you in crouch, which was the most important part, because a lot of characters just had no way of really challenging it from a crouch position, and that's really unfortunate. But they made it so it costs more of her soul charge gauge, which alone is a big deal, but they also now let us RI it, resist impact it, which is also a really big deal, because if you also recall in one of the most recent patches, they made it so RI reduces 25% of the opponent's soul gauge, which means that if a move now costs more soul gauge to use, and it's now RI-able, which it never used to be, and that RI will now take away 25% of the soul gauge, you're essentially spending half a bar for half a bar. So you're trading. And now that RI, it's your advantage, it's your turn. So that move has now gone from being a spammable brain-dead move to a somewhat, it's powerful, but for soul charge standards, a somewhat fair move in terms of its application and counterplay. So honestly, oh, and also when they fixed verticals, as we call them, so tracking verticals, Sophie 66B was one of the ones to get hit. So in that sense, it's easier to step now, whereas it used to have a ton of tracking, so it was super hard to avoid. So these little quality of life changes and the system changes, that being the verticals and RI, did bump Sophie down a bit to right where I think she should be. This character is straight up designed to be super straightforward, all around, solid, neutral. She's very flexible, and I don't think you could ever go wrong maining Sophitia, ever. I think that she's a great character. Now, Cassandra is kind of the opposite. Cassandra is very new school, actually. So Cassandra is generally played in a very aggressive way, a little bit linear compared to her counterpart, Sophitia. They both do have moves, or both of their 6/6As function the same. The difference being actually that Cassandra's is safe, oddly enough, whereas Sophitia's is not. Cassandra also has a ton of damage at the expense of her own guard gauge, and then her her unique mechanic Divine Force also gives her access to either plus frames whenever she wants, that being 1A plus B, which is the tornado at her feet. That's actually plus on block. Or it can set up just for some crazy combos and crazy damage. Again, the same move, by the way, tornado. Her soul charge is insane. Like, everything Cassandra has in soul charge is so powerful. Like, very new school character. You can tell that she was designed with new life because very aggressive. Best frame data in the game. Like, the fact that her 2-2B is plus on block, I think, is just crazy to me. Just crazy. And her 1K is a jumping low that is fantastic frame data as well. Like, she just has everything that you want from sort of a Season 2 Soul Calibur 6 character. With that said, I think she's a little one-dimensional in her game plan. While you can still obviously play however you want with the character, to fully utilize the character does become a little one-dimensional, which is why you don't see a lot of successful Cassandra players. The two better ones, or rather two of the best ones out there, of course, being USA's Party Wolf, or also overseas, can't remember where from, but I know Tamageki, he used to be a Maxi main, and last I saw he was playing Cassandra, and I know he was doing really well with her over there. So, very underrepresented for sure, but still a great character. Very powerful, but does use her own guard gauge for some attacks, some for more powerful ones. That's a little bit of a factor. Does have a crouch throw, great grab throw game with command throws in both directions, much like Setsuka. Good character, but a little one-dimensional for my taste anyway. So for that, again, kind of right in the middle, A tier. Not on the higher end, not on the lower end, just kind of floating around in the middle. That's my thoughts on Cassandra. All right, so we're coming to the close here on the A tier. We're almost there. I kind of only have two more picks that I want to throw in here, and that's probably gonna be it for that. So first up, I'm gonna put Groh. So Groh is a character who I previously, I think, had lower than this, but frankly, he's not that bad of a character. Like, he has a very serviceable game plan. He's very easy to play because he is a new character to the game, and so I assume the devs wanted him to be a bit easier to pick up and play. But what makes him crazy is his damage output off of his lethal hits, and his soul charge can get a bit crazy. His soul charge in general can get a bit crazy. His lethal hits, with that said, are some of the easiest to hit in the game, and by that I mean their conditions are very straightforward and very natural. So, you know, he has a lethal hit just for counter hitting, or a move that has a tech sidestep and it lethal hits for sidestepping a move. Like, things like that. You're using the move in the way it's meant to be used, you're going to get a lethal hit. Whereas some characters have very obscure lethal hits associated with weird moves, or ones that require very specific situations. This is not the case for Groh. The only thing with Groh, and the biggest issue he has, is I-10 characters. So, for those of you who maybe don't know, all of Groh's stance transitions on block, except for one, I believe, and it's the slowest one, go figure, can all be stuffed, or all of the options he has thereafter, including the sidestep, can all be stuffed out with an I-10 attack. And it's just the I-10s. Like, I-12's working at some of the transitions, yes, and some of the moves, but not all of them. Whereas I-10s will be every single move after almost every single transition on block. And the problem is with Groh, if I'm not mistaken, you actually can't hit confirm these transitions. You kind of have to just dial them in, or it's almost like a slide input. if you will. So you don't have time to recognize like, oh, I did or oh, I didn't. And so when he has to fight characters with I-10s, granted that's only what, 6 characters, it can be a bit of a rough time for him. But if you exclude that, or if you don't feel the need to use the stances on Groh, very serviceable game plan. The best approach buttons in the game, for sure, in terms of space control and what they offer him. Yeah, just a really solid character. I think he's a little outclassed, but I don't think that's fair because his soul charge is very unique in how it acts, and there is a lot of metagame around it. So that alone keeps him relevant, and again, the accessibility of his lethal hits is also very, very good. Plus, we've actually seen a lot of success from Groh players in the past couple months, showing that he is still a character. Don't forget that he's a thing, and I think myself included, I was undervaluing him a little bit before. Given that Xianghua has a really good matchup into him, maybe there was a bit of a bias there, so I think for now I'm comfortable putting him kind of on the lower end of the A tier, for me, anyway. And then, pretty much to round it off in the A tier, believe it or not, we're actually going to go with... I think we're going to go with Haohmaru. I say I think. Nightmare's top 3. Hey, Florida. Haohmaru is a pretty underrepresented character in general, but recently he's kind of been making some waves in various online tournaments and stuff. Now, when Haohmaru came out, I remember I didn't know anything about him for the longest time because I couldn't have been bothered to lab the character because no one played him, which I thought was a bit crazy given he was a new character. And everyone was telling me that he was bottom 5, like garbage tier, terrible character. And I was like, okay, sure, he's a terrible character. Sure, why not? Like, whatever. But then I played against Haohmaru's and I was like, this character doesn't seem that bad. And then I labbed the character and I was like, yeah, sure, he's got, like, his special attacks are, some of them are punishable. But like, this character's not that bad. Like, you just can't be crazy with him. And I think that's maybe where Soul Calibur 6 players kind of run amiss with this kind of character is, much like Geralt, maybe it's also why Geralt isn't played at all. You can't play these characters super unga. Like, you can't play Geralt or Haohmaru like you play a freaking Cassandra, right? It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And maybe that's where people were kind of getting hung up, because Haohmaru has the best backstep in the game, which is great. And then to complement that backstep, he has his 6B, which is one of the best vertical lunge thrust attacks in the game, given its range and speed. And even on whiff, it's like, it's so hard to whiff punish that move because of how fast it is. I just think he's a very solid character. He has some stuff that hits like a truck. The fact he even has Rage Explosion alone gives him that sort of Siegfried-esque comeback mechanic-ish. And so that as well can give him some flair and flexibility. Power for sure. And then if you dare step when he has meter and the Rage Explosion, you're going to get slapped in the face with Eason, which is an incredibly fast, essentially critical edge. Essentially critical edge. That's just going to beat your ass. So I think he's a solid character. I haven't been told, shown, or proven that he is a low tier character. But maybe I can be disproven, I don't know. But given the Haohmarus that I have fought, which in my opinion are, some of the best ones to represent the character, they have not shown me why he is a low tier character. Therefore, I'm going to keep him at mid until I'm proven otherwise. But I could see him move up or down. I still would say I don't know enough about the character with confidence to put him higher or lower. So I'm rolling with the A tier for now. And I think Misa thinks. I think that's going to do it for my A tier, if I'm going to be honest. But first up on the A- tier that I think could arguably be at the bottom of A tier would be 2B. So this character, I'm iffy about. So if you want to argue with me, either she's the bottom of A tier, or the top of A minus tier, you know what? Like, you can be you, but I just don't see her on the same level as these characters personally. Swap those two. I'll rearrange it at the end, actually. It's not quite in the order that I'm happy with, so we'll do that at the very end. So 2B had some nice changes for her recently. It kind of gave a little more, not flexibility, but I guess usability to some of her really garbage strings and moves. But one of the biggest changes she received was her soul attack hitting grounded now, which is a pretty big deal. Now, I don't know, I'm no 2B player by any means, but I do know that she has some new combo paths now ever since then that couldn't combo into soul attack before because the character would just kind of like fall out of it. That now she can do because they don't fall out of it. And either A, it can get a relaunch in some cases, or B, they just slap you with a grounded soul attack and now they're pressuring you with soul charge. And of course 2B soul charge, pardon me, is one of her biggest selling points in its power, and so that alone was a really, really big deal. But the thing with 2B is, and I still wholeheartedly believe this, she genuinely relies on the stances to do anything. Because if you actually sit down and you have just a standard frame data character, like let's say Geralt or Cervantes, right? Pretty standard framed characters. If you look at the frames and you look at how she works and you know all the punishable moves on 2B, oh my goodness, like if 2B isn't in stance, everything she does like is a huge risk. And the thing is, there's very few options or situations where there is a mix-up associated with that risk. Just by that I mean, as an example, very quick example, is her 22AA or 22AB, which is a swipe, either vertical or horizontal. You can GI both, I believe, but the timing is a bit different. But even those alone are a risk because one is steppable, one is duckable. You can auto GI them, you can GI them, you can maybe reversal edge them, I'm not sure. And then if you only do 22A, that is also punishable. So every single option is punishable, and frankly, none of them are a low. So realistically, I could just stand there and block anyway. So her mix-up game is just associated with very low risk-reward outside of stance. And then even when she's in those stances, there's very generic counterplay. For example, reversal edge. Everyone talks about reversal edge because it is worth talking about with 2B. Generally speaking, with her, what do you call it? AGS, reversal edge tends to beat every option except for going reverse into the rocket fist. So she has to like reverse, backflip, rocket fist, and that beats the reversal edge. But that is two guesses, or two inputs, I guess, two situations that the 2B had to do just to deal with your one press of a button, which beats every other option. And so just things like that, well, it's not necessarily the beats all play, it is a play, really hamper her in that respect. Aerial leap is a little bit gimmicky, and by gimmicky I mean some characters can deal with it, some characters can't. Some characters can deal with it in such a way that she never wants to use it, some characters can't, so that's a little bit more matchup specific for sure. Yeah, she's just so punishable in neutral. Like, she has to just default to just one hit pokes if she wants to play it safe, and that's it. Like, that's all she has in terms of safety. If you know the frame data, she just kind of struggles to get any sort of real pressure going. Heaven forbid that you play a character with a crouch throw too, which can handle AGS very well, or a character like Zas with his CE. Oh my god, that CE probably destroys 2B. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think her matchup chart and her game plan is solid enough to really compete with these. Like, you'll actually notice a trend with the A tier characters, except for Cassandra, is they're all very, for the most part, very fundamental based in like movement, good defense, good pokes, good timing, stuff like that. And I don't think 2B really fits into that role. I don't think Cassandra does either, but I think her very somewhat aggressive design and game plan is powerful. enough to sort of join this group here. I don't think 2Bs is, frankly. I really don't. Still a good character, and her matchup chart is again very sort of night and day depending on what she has to deal with, but just not quite on the same level of these, in my opinion. Okay, so next up in A-, I'm definitely going to rearrange the order here, but we're going to go with Tira. So Tira is a character who I was talking about consistency earlier regarding like why I think consistency is a powerful tournament trait. But Tira arguably is the most inconsistent character in Soul Calibur, by design anyway, if we exclude bugs, because of her mood swap nature. So the thing with Tira is most people would argue that Gloomy is one of the best characters in the game, and Jolly is arguably one of the worst characters in the game. And I don't think it's quite that black and white, frankly. So what makes Jolly so good is that it has average to high meter gain, some of the best movement in the game. I'm pretty sure top 3, both sidestep and backstep. Access to fantastic staggers, and by that I mean strings where the Tira can either opt to be safe by doing the single hit or go for the second hit, which is a really good counter hit, and it's like moderately unsafe. So, you know, -12, -14. And then she can kind of just loop some of these staggers. The most common one that you're going to see from Tira players is, of course, her 6B. While the 6B does have very difficult to perform OS, it still is not a catch-all option. That's why it's OS. And so like 6B, 6B, 6B throw, 6BB, 6BK, 6B, like you can just sort of run this bit of a jolly meta game with 6B. That's what I'm referring to by stagger pressure, just so we're on the same page. She has decent pokes, great range when she's in Jolly. Like, she does not put herself in harm's way all that much. The problem with Jolly is it's god awful damage if you don't CE, and also its sort of reliance on landing the headbutt mood swaps in order to actually get to Gloomy. So what you'll see a lot of Tiras do in neutral is they'll start the game with 4. I almost guarantee you every Jolly Tira is going to start the game with 4. And the reason why is they want to try to create that space and actually taunt. And it's not just to cause you grief, it's because the taunt has a chance of swapping to Gloomy. This is why Tiras do it. So it actually becomes a small metagame where the Tira player is going to go, oh, I'm going to taunt, and then they're going to see, oh, is my opponent going to charge at me? Are they going to respect me? Am I going to be able to squeak out a Gloomy swap here? Am I not? This is just what Tiras do. And when they're not doing that, they're moving around the screen with their great movement, looking for jolly whiff punishes, generally into either 6-6B, 2-2A, or 3B, which all 3 of those moves convert into headbutt, which can lead to potential big Gloomy damage. And so this is the gameplay loop of Jolly Tira. Look for whiff punishes, headbutt, Gloomy swap. Rinse and repeat. The problem with that is if you're a character who can kind of contest Tira's range as Jolly Tira, she really doesn't like that. And then that's where Gloomy Tira comes in. So segue into that. Gloomy Tira has very good buttons. Some of the best in-slot tools, period. You know, like her 3A in Gloomy. A safe, hit confirmable for ludicrous damage, I-14, which is also a punish. You know, so her best I-14 punish in the game, if we assume no meter, I'm pretty sure. Which leads to great damage, and it tech crouches. 6B, which is probably one of the few remaining vertizontals in the game, in that it is such a far-reaching move. It has a lethal hit associated with it. Granted, her lethal hit conditions are super wacky and tough to get, but that's beside the point. The Gloomy 3B is also a tech crouch, so much like Taki or Siegfried, you can use it in situations where you would want to duck high, and there's just even more to the character. Then Gloomy Coda, when you finally get it, is insanely good. That character is the best character in the game, probably. Assuming, like, if you could never get out of Gloomy Coda, like, top 3 character, easily. But unfortunately, that's not the reality, and actually getting Gloomy Coda is very difficult. if you're talking just natural stacks, because what I had mentioned with consistency, I love Tira. I have a Tira. I've played a lot of Tira. I think she's a brilliantly designed character, and I love it. The problem is, you're kind of just rolling the dice with this character, because there are games where I will get, swaps on, let's just throw numbers out, 70% of my headbutts. There are some games where I'll get swaps on 30% of my headbutts. I have played full 5-round matches where I have not I have not actively gotten one single swap off of anything I've done. From Jolly to Gloomy. Let me be clear on that. From Jolly to Gloomy. That being, of course, headbutts, taunts, and the B plus K. Which is atrocious. Which means, in that sense, if you theoretically never got a swap off of headbutt or the B plus K headbang, the only way you could swap from Jolly to Gloomy is either CE, Reversal Edge, or going below 30% and 5% health. And so theoretically, you're never going to be in Gloomy more than maybe a round worth of gameplay. So I think as Tira, if you have a bad Jolly Tira, you're not going to be a good Tira. But if you have a good Jolly Tira, and then you can work on your Gloomy Tira, yeah, you're okay. But majority of the game, Tira is Jolly Tira. It's kind of like Amy, like I said earlier. If Amy was just roseless Amy for most of the match, she'd probably be somewhere like here. But because it is just, quite frankly, so easy to get 4 reds, and she's more often red rose than not red rose, at least it feels like that. Not to mention her base kit is way better than Jolly Tira, so maybe that's a bad comparison. She's up here. But Tira, mostly being Jolly Tira and having a somewhat one-dimensional game plan, that being run away and whiff punish, kind of leads her to being lower tier in my opinion. But don't get me wrong, I love this character. I just don't think that she has what it takes if the gods are not on your side, so to speak. So anyway, a bit long-winded there. That's my thoughts on Tira. I love the character though, but just going from Jolly to Gloomy inconsistently, it's a big problem. Big problem. I know headbutts I-12, but still. Alright, so next up, let's put Aswell. Let's just talk about Aswell. I'm probably going to rearrange it again, but we'll do it after. So Aswell hasn't changed in a hot minute. He's still the same kind of character. Super boring soul charge to deal with. By that, I mean you're dealing with all the weapon arts and all of his buttons being their full capacity speed. That's what makes the soul charge so strong, by the way, is not the Beyblade spin, because it uses way too much of the soul charge gauge for any real value. Not to mention, if you RI it now, it drains his soul gauge, so it's really not worth the risk to go for the spinny spin. But of course, in soul charge, he gets access to every button, and that's why it's so strong, not the Beyblade. I just wanted to get that out of the way first and foremost. As well as a character who, I hate this character, for the record. I hate fighting this character. I think it's really annoying. I think he just invites degeneracy. But he has the problem now where, like, he used to be, so Aswell used to be right here. And for the longest time, everyone had him top 2, top 3. This is back in Season 1. But what hit him a bit was, frankly, more understanding and matchup knowledge from everyone's perspective, myself included. And he did take some hits where, like, either the damage was hit, or the Oki was hit, or, like, he just took hits as the game went on that kind of hampered his style and his power. He's not just Axwell anymore, because some of his axe moves did take some hits, that now he doesn't just rely on it. With that said, though, when Aswell is in the weapon form he needs for the given moves, he does still have some of the best in-slot moves in the game. That, of course, being what I mean by that is, like, when he's in sword form, his 5A being I-10, oh my god, it's a really powerful I-10, insanely powerful. Or when he's in shield, he gets one of the best break attacks in the game via 4B, just with its raw speed, its range, lethal hit, great button, great auto GIs. And then of course Axe doesn't really need much of an introduction, but 6B is a great button, 3A is a great button, 6B is a great button, Axe Low is a good button. But what kind of holds Aswell back is he didn't really age well. When every other character started getting insane, Aswell kind of kept getting worse, and so he just hasn't really stood the test of time. Like when you think about Aswell, and I, this was my justification. When I critically think about Aswell, and I think, okay, his defensive options are trash, and by that I mean his GI game and his reversal edge options are so bad. I'm like, what does this character really have that I am afraid of? Like, what am I genuinely afraid of when I play against an Aswell? And frankly, it's basically 6B, 3B, and Axe Low. And even then, it's basically just Axe Low and 6B. And that's it. And so if you like, I always say this to people who think Aswell's broken. If you took Axe Low out of his kit, that one move, would he still be broken? In that person's opinion. And generally the answer is no. And I think a great comparison for Aswell is Yoshi. Because Yoshi full crouch 3k into reverse crouch cancel 3b does something like 42 damage. And so it's like, alright, Yoshi has a comparable low, which leads into a similar situation with better Oki, and it's not just a one-time use. You know, like, so I just think Aswell hasn't really stood the test of time. And hasn't aged well, if you will. Still a playable character though, super annoying to fight. But you're playing against a 5-button character, regardless, or no matter what stance he's in, sword, shield, axe. And so if you know how to play around those 5 buttons, you're fine. You're fine. So that's my thoughts on Aswell. All right. Next up, let's do. Well, basically it's everyone except a couple of characters, but let's do Astaroth. So Astaroth, I hate this character even more. Oh my god, anyone who knows me knows, or has watched me play knows, I fucking hate this character. I just can't stand the risk-reward style. It's really hard for me to defend against. It doesn't really give me time to think usually. The existence of his bull rush and 6k just make me pull my hair out. Really frustrating for me to deal with as a player. But in a more critical standpoint, holy mackerel, like, Astaroth is the one making all the right reads in order to win the game, frankly. Like, yes, there's counterplay, yes, there's things you can do, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if the Astaroth is not a very good Astaroth, you can straight up lose to Astaroth. That is just the nature of the character. Like, sometimes you kind of just have to take the L's and move on when you're fighting Astaroth, because if you dwell on a loss against an Astaroth who grabbed you like 3 times, you know, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. So I don't think he's a good character, but or a great character, but I think he's a good character because he just keeps getting buffed and buffed and buffed, and more so even recently, where now, so you know how his command throws can be charged? And you know, that was the reason to beat things like Reversal Edge or GI. Well, now his regular command throws, 214 and 226, are RE safe. Which was like, that was one of the easiest buttons to hit against Astaroth was RE, but you can't even do that now. So, you know, this character just keeps getting stuff, and I worry one day he's going to get so much to where he's just going to be back to how he used to be in past games, and it's just insane. But for now, he's still a little bit on the lower tier end of things. But man, is he powerful. A couple right reads and you've already lost a round. A couple more right reads and you've lost the game. So, as Astaroth, I hate this character. Let's move on. Okay. Let's do. I'm going to put. Let's put Kilik. So Kilik is a character who, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I just think Kilik's outclassed right now. I think that's all it is. by no means is he a bad character. I just think he's straight up outclassed. Like, I don't know why you would choose to pick Kilik. Like, if we're talking strictly on paper, I don't know why you would choose Kilik over most any other character in the game. Yes, he is relatively well-rounded. He does have a lot of, you know, functional tools. He has in-slot buttons that accomplish jobs you need. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you want to play him at range, there are characters that do that better. If you want to play him up close, there are characters that do that better. And if you want to play him as a hybrid style, there are characters that do that better. His damage outside of Soul Charge isn't that great. His critical edge outside of Soul Charge isn't that great. His low pokes aren't that great, assuming you break the throw part of the 1A. And like, yeah, okay, he has 4A, but like the range on that thing is pitiful. And yeah, you know, he just doesn't have enough to compete. And what I've always said before is Kilik just doesn't have the X factor, is what I like to say. He doesn't have that wow factor where it's like, whoa, this is why I play this character. And before anyone says, well, his soul charge, Zedd, please. You look at half the soul charges in this game and they're just as volatile as his. You know, so don't even bring soul charge into the equation, because his is not special. When it should be, frankly, it should be. Like, by design, his soul charge should theoretically be the best in the game, but it's not. So I don't know why you'd pick this character, but I don't think he's a bad character, which is why he's still an A-, not the B tier. And so, yeah, he's still A-, not quite B tier. That tier is reserved for a couple of characters, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, so next up, we have Talim. So Talim is a character who has seen a lot of help over the patches. Particularly notable is her 6k buff. So previously 6k was a relatively useless attack, relatively. Now it is a very quick tech crouching, which I didn't know till recently. Very quick tech crouching I-12 wall splat Punisher with insane range. Easily one of the best I-12 punishes in the game. In terms of the standard, like, no meter. And it actually gave her some hilarious buffs to some of her worst matchups, most notably the Maxi matchup. Maxi almost always had it over Talim, period, with one button alone, that being 6A plus B. That move would literally dumpster that character. And then they gave her 6k, which, not related to 6A plus B, though. Her 6k makes it so Maxi almost legitimately cannot use 1B on hit against a Talim, because it beats every single option except for raw B plus K. And that only works too at further ranges, not even closer ranges. So quite literally, that matchup went from being like Maxi favored a bit because of one button to now being Talim favored a bit because of one button. But the point is, like, even that alone was enough to make it so Maxi can't even use his best low. Yeah. So that move got some sick buffs. She does crazy good damage, like crazy good damage. She can be definitely, like, what's the word? She can be very wow. Difficult to deal with. Suffocating, that's the word. She can be very suffocating if you don't know how to handle her stances. She also is a kind of character who forces you to stick your neck out a little bit on defense. You kind of have to challenge her, otherwise you're just going to get run over. While I do think you should still play defensive against Talim and definitely take your time and not approach her, once she's in your face, you can't just statue block. You do have to be a little more proactive with your defense against her, and that's, I think, where a lot of people slip up versus her. Overall, she has some tools, but she also lacks a lot of different tools, and the 6k was definitely a start in the right direction for her, so we could see her move up further in the tier list, but for now, still a bit of a lower tier character, has basically no neutral to speak of whatsoever, no range to speak of whatsoever. A couple of really good buttons that you could just get away with using, for example, or the best example rather, is what is it, 6BK or 4BK? I always forget which direction. but it's essentially a vertical thrust into a front flip kick. It's such a good string. It's such a good string. Her back turned also received some buffs and new moves that really help her out for sure. But still, you know, if she's not in your face, she's not doing anything. But let's be fair. If we're talking the design of the character and her weapon being elbow blades and tonfas, that should be how it is. When she's in your face, that's where she's at her best. When she's at range, there's literally nothing she can do other than Falcon Punch you and hope for a lethal hit. So that's Talon. Okay, next up we have Siegfried. Siegfried, I think, is a kind of the Aswell problem. Like, again, in past patches, Aswell and Siegfried were actually top 2. And it's so funny to think about, like, how far we've come in terms of the game development. But the reason I have Siegfried down here so low is because he cannot catch a break. He just keeps getting nerfed over and over and over. Most notably, the two biggest ones that stick out to me that is happening recently were the base hold B and K, which is when his sword is down, it's an auto GI stance. Most commonly, he goes into this from doing the A slide B just frame and holding it. It's a break attack vertical or the shoulder charge vertical. Previously, you used to have to step one way and the other. Now you can step both of them either direction easily, clearly, and consistently. And oddly enough, that actually really hurts him. And that actually happened during, I believe it was the Vertizontal patch, where they made the break attack B very linear. And the shoulder charge very linear. So that, and his 3A4, which is his little ore slap, has no pushback on it anymore at all. It's completely useless. Previously, you could step it to the direction that he wasn't swinging. So, you know, if he swang this way, then you could step it the same, or you can step it the same way he's swinging. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. But you can't do that anymore. But it has zero pushback. It has zero pushback. So he's now such a basic character outside of Dark Legacy, and that's kind of what they did. And I feel like that was the intention, was we're going to put all this character's chips in the Dark Legacy comeback, that if you don't get the Dark Legacy comeback, you have a relatively subpar character. Yeah, he has big moves, and yeah, they sometimes hit hard. And he has a safe CE, which is a really big deal, actually. But Dark Legacy is kind of the only thing holding this character together. And even then, you could make an argument against that too. But I just don't think Siegfried's that good right now. Yeah, just he's kind of a 5-move character now. He never used to be, but I really feel like that's where we are with Siegfried these days. And that's really unfortunate, because I think that he's a cool character, actually. But I don't think he's very good. I don't know. I'm not sure what else to say about him, other than his stances are all fake pressure. They're all a joke. They're all a joke. So, if you know how to deal with it. Okay, and then last up for A- tier, we have Valdo. So Valdo is a character who, again, is also getting buffs, much like Talon. Like they're slowly etching these characters into higher levels of play and higher tiers. Valdo is very unorthodox, obviously. Very crazy. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to lab, because you have to lab him 2 ways. Two ways, I think 4 stances and a ton of different strings, not to mention all the different moves he has that are punishable within that mess. So he's tough to lab for sure. But I mean, shit, I don't even have it all down yet. But he just still lacks a bit, especially if your character has a bit of range. If you have a character who can contest front-facing Valdo's neutral game, Valdo struggles. Valdo really struggles against some matchups. And if you're a shorter range character, yeah, he has his 1K, which recently got buffed to being only -12 on block, which is a really big deal. Or his front-facing 2-2A, which I believe is also safe now on block, and it's a knockdown on counter hit, which is a big deal. But in general, I think Valdo still doesn't quite have an identity. I've been saying this ever since they nerfed his Mantis. Because at one point in time, Valdo was actually super top tier and super good. And Mantis used to just kind of run a train, and then they just killed it. They nerfed it. And they're slowly bringing him back now a bit. But I still think he's a bit lower on the tier list. Think he can just I think he loses a lot of different matchups. But frankly, he is a bit underrepresented, so maybe I'm wrong, but I know that Manta in the West, he's, a Valdo specialist, purist, if you will. Um, and so he's kind of what I'm basing this off of, and I just think that Valdo does lack a little bit in terms of his toolkit and what he could do. So for B tier, first up we have Taki. So Taki, I don't know, like maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. A lot of people say this character is like really good, and I don't buy it. Like I've never bought it. I don't agree. I have no reason to agree. I've thought this character was trash ever since they took away her guaranteed like 100 plus damage combo unblockable, where it was like it was Ninja Bomb into front flip roll, turn around, Seal of the Fire Dragon, 100 and some odd damage, which I thought that was too high, granted, but the reason it didn't scale is because it wasn't a combo, but there was no way to avoid it unless you played Xianghua, which is super privilege. And so ever since they took that away, I was like, wow, this character sucks. And then in Season 2, they gave her a bunch of new stuff. They gave her a low from Stalker, which is pretty cool. And then they gave her the 668 plus B approach tool, which is the best button she has now, easily. But then they nerfed the Stalker low twice, by the way, and they didn't give her anything to compensate. So, and she's just a buggy mess half the time. Her damage just, it's not what it used to be, and her pressure is not what it used to be. Her lows are non-existent, like at all. What lows? And yeah, 668 plus B hold, or 668 plus B is her best button, and that saying that alone is atrocious. Like if that's your best button, yikes, bro. Like yikes, you got another thing coming. And I think a best example is, while he's not the like a god tier player, but one of the best knowledgeable talkies out there, most knowledgeable talkies, pardon my English, is Artgraves from the West Coast. He basically pioneers a lot of the Taki stuff, and even he's dropping the character these days because he's just like, yeah, this character's awful. Like, she just has nothing going for her anymore. And I frankly agree. Like, granted, I think Xianghua is a good matchup into Taki, but I think you can just deal with her garbage so easily. Possession having no real good answer to 2A is a joke. In case you're like, but Zedd, what do you mean? She can jump over it. Yeah, she actually has 2 or 3 options that beat the 2A. The problem is the only option that beats it, that's the safest, is doing the backflip, which, safest. And then she has the jumping move, which I think is 6A, but that's also punishable. And then she has the leap over kick attack, which is like minus 16, I think. So she has no way to even handle a basic 2A when she goes into possession, and that is a sad life. That is a sad life. So I think Taki sucks. And if you lab the character and you pick her apart and you see what your character can do against her possession stance, I think she's kind of a joke. Personally. And then last up on the list, and yeah, this is the one that everyone seems to argue with me over, and I cannot begin to tell you why this character is so bad, but that's Mr. Maximilian, the gay pirate. He is so bad, and other than maybe 1-2 matchups, all of his matchups are like slightly unfavored or unfavored. Like, this character is so atrocious if you really break it down and you look at, like, okay, what can I do against his stances? Like, you can do even just basic movement for all the characters. Like box stepping, for example, just 4-2, that beats a lot of the stance stuff. or just even reversal edge really hits him. Heaven's Guard, Heaven's Guard when he got Heaven's Guard, that wasn't even that good. And everyone was like, "Oh, Maxi top 1, Maxi top 5. This character's broken." And at first, I was like, "Wow, yeah, Heaven's Guard is really good. Actually, it really brings him into the game a little bit." No, no, it doesn't. The risk reward just isn't there. And then they have the audacity to nerf it. It's like, oh, okay, all right. Now we're back to season 1 days where you can literally 2K this character to oblivion. And if you don't believe me, try it and see for yourself, or if you have another faster low. But Maxi's so bad. Like he has so much counterplay. It's freaking atrocious. And don't even get me started if your character has auto GIs. Like if your character has auto GIs, oh my god, like there's nothing Maxi can do. His neutral sucks. They made 2-2A punishable, which is a joke. Like there was no reason that needed to be punishable, but it is. 6-6A plus B is a joke. 6-6A plus B hold is a joke. 4-4B is fairly good actually, but it's very linear and very slow. Back lower is the thing that fucks people up online and ranked, but that's exactly it, online and ranked. His damage is good. I'll give him that. That's the only thing. That's the only thing Maxi has is good damage. But that's it. Like this character is so bad. If you lab this character, granted it's a lot of effort if you don't have a lot of hours against him, but if you lab this character, he is atrocious. And God, if you play characters like Raph, Amy, Xianghua, Sophie, Yoshi, Taki, actually, this is one of Taki's good matchups. Ivy, believe it or not. These are all characters that just completely destroy Maxi. And it's not even hard too. Like I'm not talking like we're not talking like, oh, you have to micro step Twitch to no, like you have so much time to react to these different problems. You can't PSL into PSL. You can re-GI the B plus K. You can re-RI the Heaven's Guard. His soul charge isn't that good. Yeah. Anyway, I feel that's the best place to end it is like Maxi, dude. Maxi really is the bottom of the barrel. So many Maxi mains have quit or stopped playing him. Even my, the guy I've played games with for over 5 years was a Maxi specialist, and he quit because of just how bad Maxi actually is. So yeah, no, Maxi is utterly atrocious, and you cannot and will not, frankly, convince me otherwise, and I will convince you that he is atrocious. So that's the tier list. Let's just quickly reorganize it. We're actually doing well on time. A lot of the tier list videos are like 2.5 hours, so I guess I didn't go in as much depth as I usually do, which that's fine, I think. I think that's fine. So yeah, this is my tier list. You can feel free to close the video now. Thanks for watching, but if you want to see the finished product, let's work through this a little bit. I'm not going to spend too long on it though. But yeah. So let's see here. Hilde Ivy. The mid tier is the one I think I wanted to tweak a little bit more. Let's see. Yeah, I think I'm fine with that. And then for these guys, these are pretty tied. Servi's really good. Geralt's pretty ho-hum. I'm not sure about these last three. I think you can make an argument for any of them, but we're gonna run with this. So yeah, anyway, this I think I'm happy with this organization of the list. Again, if you really want to even out the lines, and maybe for sake of simplicity we will, but like you could definitely put 2B here 100%. Like I think that's a fair justification. And I think for sake of lining up the 3 lines, I will. But I think that she's bottom of the A or top of A minus. I could really go either way with this character. Um, but this just looks nicer, so we're gonna go with this. So yeah. Anywho, that's my tier list. Yeah. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.